祝你生日快乐 Feliz cumpleaños a ti Joyeux anniversaire Do I know any others? 祝你生日快乐 Recap time. So chapter 4 was called Honest Work. We finally went to the Avatar Mansion and we met Auntie Mui, who seems kind of like fun and bubbly, but also like when she's strict, she needs to be strict. She's in charge of like the kitchen staff and the household staff. We learned that Kelsong literally has been taking care of Kyoshi this whole 9 years. Like, he's gone out of his way to make sure she is fed and clothed, and he's spent more time in Yokoya to make sure that she's okay. And when he does have to go out of town, he finds people to take care of her. So that is so sweet, because she literally had no one in the world, and so now she had Kelsong. We learned that Kelsong and Genju have a little rift going on. Yikes. And then, okay, this chapter, I forgot that I'm so excited for chapter 5 because at the end of chapter 4, Auntie Mui was like, let's do haikus. And everyone was like, we hate haikus. And so instead, Kelsong started singing a shanty and everyone was like, that's fun. And so they started singing sea shanty type things. And when they were like, Kyoshi, do one. And she did one. And the first one she did, like, Kelsong was like, ha ha ha. I think that's about Rongi. He didn't say that, but she could see it in his face. But then she sang 2 more. And at the end of the chapter, Kelsong was like, where did you learn that song? So, we're about to find out where she learned that song. Doot! Doot! Chapter 5, Revelations. After Kelsong took her aside into an empty study and spent half an hour tearfully apologizing for hurting her, he told her why he'd lost control. I'm such an emotional wreck, you guys. This is gonna be rough. Oh, Kyoshi said in response to the worst news she'd ever heard in her life. She ran her fingers through her hair and threw her head back. The library where they were hiding was taller than it was long, a mineshaft cramped with scrolls, yanked off the shelves and put back without care. Beams of sunlight revealed how much dust was floating around the room. She needed to clean this place up. You're mistaken, she said to Kelsong. Yoon is the Avatar. Genju identified him nearly 2 years ago. Everyone knows this. Kelsong didn't look any happier than she did. You don't understand. After Korok died, the earthen traditions around locating the Avatar fell apart. Imagine if the seasons suddenly refused to turn. It was chaos. After so many failures, the sages, earthbenders especially, felt abandoned by the spirits and their ancestors alike. Kyoshi leaned back against the ladder and gripped the rungs tightly. There was talk of Korok being the last of the cycle, that the world was destined for an age of strife to be torn apart by outlaws and warlords, until Genju labeled Yoon as the next Avatar. But the way it happened had no precedent. Tell me this. With the two of you as close as you are, has Yoon ever once told you the details? She shook her head. It was strange now that Kelsong mentioned it. That's because Genju probably forbade him. The full story would cast the shadow of illegitimacy on him. The monk rubbed his eyes. It was abhorrently dusty in here. We were in Makapu, surveying the volcano, the same volcano from the fortune teller episode. We'd honestly given up on finding the Avatar, like so many others. On the last day of our trip, we noticed a crowd growing in a corner of the town square. They were gathered around a child with a pie show board, Yoon. He was hustling tourists like us, and he'd made quite a bit of money at it, too. To give his opponents confidence, he was running the blind bag gambit. My brain went to blind bandit, and I was like, what? He was running the blind bag gambit. It's when your opponent plays normally, picking their tiles, but you dump yours into a sack and mix them up randomly. Whatever you draw each turn is what you have to play. An insurmountable disadvantage. Kyoshi could see it too easily. Yoon's silver tongue coaxing money out of people's wallets. A stream of banter and flashing smiles. He could probably bankrupt bankrupt someone and still leave them happy to have met him. Sorry. What most people don't know, and what Yoon didn't know, was that the blind bag is supposed to be a scam, Kelsang said. You're meant to rig the tiles or the bag itself so you have a way to find the exact combinations you need. But Yoon wasn't cheating. He was actually drawing randomly and winning. We might have passed it off as a kid enjoying a string of luck, but Jeonju noticed he was drawing and playing Korok's favorite strategies, turn by turn, down to the exact placement of the exact tile. Game after game he was doing this. He displayed tricks and traps that Korok explicitly kept secret from anyone but us. It sounds like Korok took Pai's show pretty seriously, Kyoshi said. Kelsang snorted and then sneezed, sending a little tornado spiraling toward the skylight. It was one of the few things he did, and he was unequivocally one of the greatest players in history. Depending on what rules you're using, you have as many as 60 tiles. There are over 200 spots on the board where you can put them. To randomly draw and then brilliantly execute a precise line of play that only Korok was mad enough to win with in the annals of the game, the odds of it are unfathomable. Kyoshi didn't have a taste for Pai's show, but she knew that masters often talked about play styles being as individualistic and recognizable as a signature, an identity contained within the board. After what Jeonju went through with Xu Ping-an and the Yellownecks, it was as if a mountain range had been lifted off his shoulders, Kelsang said. Any doubts he might have had completely vanished when he saw Yoon earthbend. Granted, the kid can move rocks like no one else. If we identified the Avatar solely through a precision-bending contest, he'd be Korok's reincarnation hands down. Kyoshi thought back to this morning and Yoon's incredible manipulation of the Earth. In her mind, only the Avatar could have done that. I don't get it, she said. All of this is proof. Yoon is the Avatar. Why would you tell me why would you do that to me? Her anguish was absorbed, without an echo, by the masses of faded, crumbling paper that surrounded them. Can we get out of here? Kelsang said, his eyes red. They walked in silence toward the corridors of the mansion. Kelsang's presence justified taking the shortest route, where the visiting dignitaries might see them. They passed works of calligraphy mounted on the walls that were more precious than bricks of gold. Vases of translucent delicacy held the day's flowers cut from the garden. Kyoshi felt like a thief as they passed the casually displayed treasures, no better than an intruder who might slip past the guards and stuff each priceless item into a gunny sack. Even the servants' dormitory, plain and poorly lit, seemed to whisper ingrate at her from its dark corners. Not all of the staff were able to live on site, and she knew that a bed lifted off the floor and a wooden door that shut tight were better than what many other servants around the Earth Kingdom got. She and Kelsang squeezed it inside her room. It was cramped, the two of them being the same height. She's so tall. But as sizable people, they had practice at minimizing themselves. I bet physically and, emotionally minimizing themselves. Woo! Her quarters were small, but still technically more space than she needed. Besides a few knickknacks from her street life, her only two possessions upon moving into Jeonju's house were a heavy locked trunk that she'd stowed in the corner, and on top, the leather-bound journal that explained what was in it. Her inheritance from the days before Yokoya. You still have those, Kelsang said. I know how valuable they are to you. I remember tracking you down to the little nest you made around the trunk underneath the blacksmith's house. You hugged the book so tight to your chest and wouldn't let me read it. You looked ready to defend it to the death. Her feelings about the items were more complicated than he understood. Kyoshi had never opened the lock, having thrown the key into the ocean one day in a fit of spite. And she'd nearly burned the journal several times over. Down the hall, someone was moving about, making the pine floorboards squeak, so they waited until the footsteps disappeared. Kelsang sat on the bed, bowing the planks in the middle. Bowing? It could go either way. Kyoshi leaned against her door and braced her feet like an attacking army was trying to beat it down. So, You think I'm the Avatar because of a stupid song I made up? She said. Somewhere between the study and her room, she'd found enough backbone to say it out loud. I think you might be the Avatar because you pulled from thin air the exact lines of a poem Kuruk wrote a long time ago. Kelsang said. A poem? A poem wasn't proof. Not like the cold, hard impossibility of what Yoon did. Kelsang could tell she needed a better explanation. What I'm about to tell you, you should keep to yourself, he said. I'm listening. It was about 20 years ago. Kuruk's companions were still very close, but without any real challenges, we drifted toward our separate lives. Genju started working on his family's holdings. Heidan started teaching at the Royal Fire Academy and married Rangi's father, Junsik, in the same year. It was the happiest I'd ever seen her. As for me, that was when Abbot... Oh, I forgot to look up how to pronounce Dorji. Dorje. Dorj. Abbot Dorj was alive, and I was still in his good graces. So I was being groomed to take over the Southern Air Temple. Assigning a path to the venerable benders was a strange mix of satisfying and unnervingly voyeuristic. She was spying on things she shouldn't be privy to. What was Kuruk doing? Being Kuruk, traveling the world, breaking hearts and taking names. But one day he showed up on my doorstep out of the blue, trembling like a schoolboy. He wanted me to read over a declaration of eternal love he'd composed in a poem. Kelsang inhaled sharply through his nose. Kyoshi kept her room dust-free and spotless. This happened 2 months after Heidan's wedding and 3 months before Genju's father got sick, he said. He used a more formal meter than a sailor's ditty, and he didn't sing it, but its contents were exactly what you produced in the spur of the moment. That only weakened the argument. You seem to remember this in overly specific detail, Kyoshi said. The monk furrowed his brow. That's because he was going to give the poem to Heidan. Ooh! Honestly, that's why it makes sense for both Rangi and the girl that he ends up with, who I don't know her name. Oh no. She'd heard stories of the water avatar's lack of propriety, but that was going several levels too far. What happened next? I meddled, Kelsang said. Kyoshi couldn't tell if he was regretful or proud of his decision. I berated Kuruk for his stupidity and selfishness, for trying to ruin his friend's happy relationship, and made him destroy the confession while I watched. To this day, I don't know if I did the right thing. Heidan always did love Kuruk with some piece of her heart. Maybe everything would have turned out better if they had run off with each other. Kyoshi quickly did the math in her head. And yes, if that had happened, Rangi wouldn't have been born. You did the right thing, she said. You did the right thing, she said, with more ferocity than she intended to show. I'll never find out. Not long after, Kuruk met Umi. Umi's her name. Kuruk met Umi. That tragedy unfolded so fast that my memory of it starts to blur. She didn't know who Umi was, and she had no intention of asking. Matters were complicated enough. And Kyoshi was no advanced student of Avatar lore, but she was developing a pretty dim view of the man. I wish I could be more certain, Kelsang said. But if there's anything the last 2 decades have taught me, it's that life does not work out in certain guaranteed ways. I'm not supposed to talk about this, but Yoon is having problems firebending. I fear Genju is becoming more extreme. He staked so much on creating his ideal replacement for Kuruk that any time he faces a setback, his response is to dig in and push harder. Kyoshi was more shaken by the revelation that Yoon couldn't firebend than anything else she'd heard so far. The image he projected was of a boy who could do the impossible. Yes, Yoon was her friend, but she still had the same faith in the Avatar as anyone else. Mastering fire should have been easy for someone as clever and talented as he was. Kelsang seemed to pick up on her fear. Kyoshi, Yoon still has the strongest case for anyone being the Avatar. That hasn't changed. He worried the end of his beard. But if the criteria we've lowered ourselves to are improbable things that Kuruk once did, then we have to consider you as well. The monk ruminated for a moment, fitting pieces together in his head. To be honest, though, I don't know if I'm entirely upset by this new complication. You have avatar-worthy merits that you won't acknowledge. Kyoshi scoffed. Such as? He thought it over more before deciding on one. Selfless humility. That's not true. I'm not any more... She caught Kelsang about to laugh at her and scowled. He got up, and her bedboards groaned with relief. I'm sorry, he said. I should have been able to answer this question years ago, and I had the chance to meet your parents like I did with the other village... had I the chance to meet your parents like I did with the other village children. More information could have made the difference. Kyoshi scrunched her face and kicked her heel back against the trunk, releasing the sudden burst of anger that ran through her. The wooden side made a drum-like thud. I'm sure they would have loved having a child as valuable as the Avatar, she snapped. A once-in-a-generation prize. Kelsang smiled at her gently. They would have been proud of their daughter no matter what, he said. I know I am. Normally, Kyoshi would have felt comforted by the acknowledgement that she'd become as much of a fixture in Kelsang's life as he had in hers. But if he walked out her door and told Genju what happened, it could tear apart the little corner of the world the two of them had marked off for themselves. Didn't Kelsang see that? Wasn't he worried? Can we keep this a secret, Kyoshi said, just for a while, until I can get my bearings? I don't want to be rash. Maybe you'll remember Korok's poem differently in the morning, or Yoon will firebend. Anything. Kelsang didn't answer. He'd been suddenly transfixed by her tiny shelf. It held a gold-dyed tassel, a few beads, a coin she'd pilfered from a shrine donation box and felt too guilty to spend and too afraid to return. The clay turtle. She couldn't remember exactly how she'd gotten. Other than that, it was a present from him. It was a present from him. He stared at the junk for a long time. Please, Kyoshi said. Kelsang looked back at her and sighed. For a little while, perhaps, he said. But eventually we have to tell Genju and the others. Whatever the truth is, we must find it together. After he left, Kyoshi didn't sit down. She thought best on her feet, motionless. Her wooden cell of a room was good enough for that. This was a nightmare. While she wasn't an important political dignitary, she wasn't an idiot either. She knew what kind of bedlam lay behind the precarious balance. She knew what kind of bedlam lay behind the precarious balance Genju and Yoon had set up, the mountain they'd suspended in the air. From around the corners, she spied on the bouts of ecstatic sobbing, the sense of utter relief that many of the visiting sages went through when they first laid eyes on Yoon. After more than a decade of doubt, he was a solid body, a sharp mind, a belatedly fulfilled promise. The inheritor of blessed Yang Chen's legacy. Avatar Yoon was a beacon of light who gave people confidence the world could be saved. Avatar Kyoshi would simply be dirt kicked over the fire. Ooh! Ooh, if she only knew how. Ooh! Her eyes landed on the journal lying on the trunk. Her pulse quickened again. Would they have left her behind if they knew there was a chance, no matter how slim, that she held some worth? A knock came from outside. Gifting duty. She'd forgotten. She shoved the entire conversation with Kelsang to the back of her mind as she opened the door. She knew from experience there was no trouble so great that she couldn't pack it away. Kelsang wasn't certain, therefore she didn't need to worry. What she needed to worry was about Rangi having her hide for... Hey, Yoon said. I was looking for you. And that is the end of Chapter 5. Brah. Real quick, let's do a summary. Kelsang leads Kyoshi into like some study or library or something. And he's like, bro, Korok composed that poem. And Kyoshi's like, I'm not the Avatar. I'm not the Avatar, stop. And then we learn that Korok, wait, hold up. Let me. Okay, we learn about how they found Avatar Yoon, because I was wondering, he's not the Avatar, so like how did they think that he was? And he was playing Pai Sho in Makapu Village. And he was using apparently Pai Sho is a very individualized game in terms of strategy, and he was using all of the same strategies that Kuruk used to use. And so they were like, he's the Avatar, and he was like also winning every time and using a method that people normally use to cheat, but he wasn't cheating and he was actually winning and being super cool. So they were like, guess he's the Avatar. And they were kind of desperate at that point. This was only 2 years ago. So he was 14 when they told him that he was the Avatar. And so then they go to Kyoshi's room, and we find out that she has this like chest with stuff in it and like a journal on top of it. I bet that's like telling us why her parents left her or something. I don't know if they died or if they left. She implied that they left, but that may also just be her projecting that she feels that they don't want her. I don't know what happened. We'll find out later. And then we find out that Kuruk was in love with Heidan, Rangi's mom, and Yoon's firebending tutor. That's why she came back to train Yoon, because Kelsang also says that she kind of was into him a little bit. Like, there was a place for her in her heart somewhere. But Heidan had just gotten married, and Kuruk was about to profess his love for her. So that's yikes. And Kelsang convinced him not to. And now Kelsang is like, I wonder if they hadn't, if they had run away together, maybe that would have made things better. Maybe, because we know Kuruk, I still don't know the details about how Kuruk ended up dying and going to the spirit world to try to save Umi or whatever, but it's low-key Umi's fault, maybe, that Kuruk is dead. Umi is the girl he ended up pursuing. So I wonder if he would have lived longer if he had ended up with Heidan. But then Kyoshi, this is so cute. Kyoshi's like, you did the right thing. Because Kyoshi says, she literally says, Kyoshi quickly did the math in her head. And yes, if that had happened, Rangi wouldn't have been born. And Kyoshi's like, girl, my crush wouldn't have been born if you had messed up their relationship. You did the right thing. And then she was like, oops, that kind of came out stronger than I wanted it to. So cute. And he's like, I don't know. And then he's like, hey, you have some Avatar-worthy merits. And she's like what? And he's like, you're humble. And she's like, I'm not humble. And then he's just like, that's what a humble person would say. Hilarious and adorable. So she's stressed. They're both stressed. And she's just like, please, can we please keep this a secret? Can we just let me think about this for a bit, and then we can tell Genju. Like, I know we need to tell him eventually, but can we just not do it yet? I'm not ready. And he's like, okay. And so then she's like stressed. And then she's like, oh, I have to go do the gift thing. Rangi's probably looking for me. But then Yoon shows up at her door unexpectedly, and he's like, sup, I was looking for you. He doesn't say sup. He says, hey, I was looking for you. And then that's the end of the chapter. We have not seen Kyoshi do any bending yet. And I'm wondering if she can't even earthbend. I mean, I'm sure maybe my guess is she can earthbend and she's accidentally firebent before and she's stressed about it. I doubt she can airbend because that's always the hardest one, to do your opposite element. Remember how hard earthbending was for Aang? So I really doubt that she's airbent. And then it sounds like they have to do it in this order. So I also kind of doubt that she's waterbent. It's so weird saying them in a past tense. But I think that it's possible. Because remember they, in chapter 2, she had said she doesn't want to tell Rangi about her little problem. And Rangi kept being like, why aren't you earthbending it? Why aren't you earthbending it? So I'm wondering if maybe she can't earthbend, or maybe every time she tries to earthbend, she earth and firebends at the same time. Like, I don't know. 4 words. Don't mess with Kyoshi. Why is this doing that? Why did Yi do my boy Yoon like this? How's he gonna act when he finds out the truth? I know. Honestly, he might be relieved. He might be relieved. Who knows? Oh, that's the wrong one. Wrong chapter. I almost started reading the next chapter. So she just has a bunch of random stuff on her shelf, but one of them is the clay turtle, which is an Avatar relic. Jesus. To the moon. I would love to learn more about Yangshan, because I have a feeling we're going to learn a lot more about Korok, we already are. And someone said that Rise of Kyoshi tells us some stuff about Avatar Setso. In the Rift, that's one of the comics. In the Rift comic, we learn a bit about Yang Shen, but she seems so cool. And I feel like we don't see a lot of female airbenders, like in flashbacks and stuff, like it's always the boys. And then of course we have Aang. Besides Ikki and Jinora, you know, those are female airbenders. And not to mention, Korra Korra spoilers, when people start airbending, and so you get more female airbenders then. But like, I would like to know more about Yang Shen. Can we talk about the first line of this chapter? After Kelsang took her aside into an empty study and spent half an hour tearfully apologizing for hurting her, he told her why he'd lost control. Like, when will your fave ever... He's this, like, huge guy who's obviously stronger than he would like to be, maybe, But, tearfully apologizing for hurting her. Like, he didn't mean to squeeze her arm that hard in the last chapter. He did because he was stressed, because she was, you know, saying the Korok thing. If I had fire, what's my sub-element? Lightning or combustion? Combustion really seems like a very specialized thing. Even though we do meet someone in Korra that can do it, I feel like that's a very, very rare skill. And not like bloodbending. I feel like any waterbender can learn bloodbending, it's just most of them don't. Whereas combustion, I feel like you have to be born with it. And does the other combustion lady, does she have the eye thing? I don't remember. Yeah. So I would, but I don't really want to do lightning either. You know, kind of like Zuko, I would want to learn how to redirect lightning. But I'm not out here trying to shoot lightning at people. And even, you know, Mako can do lightning, and he uses it for work. Like, you know, he works in a factory, and they use it there. But, like, I'm not trying to have that kind of power. Mayhaps I would be down to... I was about to say I would be down to bend blue fire like Azula, but then I was like, I want to bend that rainbow fire from the firebending masters to match my shirt. I think my grandma got it for me, actually. I love it so much because it's like low-key pride, you know? Like, it's not like in-your-face pride, which is also excellent. And I have another shirt that literally says pride on it with a rainbow. But this one, it's like, it's rainbows all over the place. But it's low-key, you know? What are my thoughts on Uncle Iroh? He's a war criminal. I'm just kidding. I love Uncle Iroh. Everyone loves Uncle Iroh. Except maybe Azula and Ozai and Azulon, maybe. No, I love Uncle Iroh. He's so iconic, and he stood by Zuko when Zuko needed him most. I don't believe he's single-handedly responsible for Zuko's redemption arc, but he did a lot of heavy lifting in Zuko's redemption arc. Thoughts on Sokka from Legend of Korra? Oh, excellent question, and I'm so mad that they barely put him in it, and only in flashback. There's no reason for him to be not alive. Or not even, fine, maybe he doesn't live as long as Katara, but Katara barely even talked about him. I wish we could have seen more of that, and I'm also mad that Zuko, Katara, and Toph don't interact that much, barely at all in Korra. They, from what I remember, I'm still rewatching, but like, they should have interacted way more, and that Zuko's the only one who like joins battles. Like, I know they're old, but hello, in the first one, the White Lotus people literally bring back Ba Sing Se to what it needs to be. Katara and Toph so could have done that and helped Zuko in the blah blah blah. And correct me if I'm misremembering the amount that they are involved, but I feel like they're not very. And it's so interesting. Vote now in the comments. Is lava bending earth or fire? Or both? Can earthbenders and firebenders bend lava? Because before, and I forget if Legend of Korra clarifies this, because before Korra came out, I remember John and I were speculating about this. In the original series, we see Avatar Setso bend some lava out of volcanoes. And I remember us being like, well, he's a firebender, so I guess it's fire. But then we were like, but he's also the Avatar, so maybe he's bending the fire and the earth in the lava. But then we find out that Bolin is a lava bender, and he's an earthbender. And does it have to do with the temperature of the lava? Maybe both earthbenders and firebenders can bend hot lava, but only earthbenders can bend lava once it's cooled, because then it's like, you know, obsidian. What do y'all think? The Avatar can lava bend the best. It's sort of fire from Avatar. I think that's cool. I think an Avatar might be better at lava bending than, you know, like Bolin or something. Just because they're bending Earth, but then any fire that's kind of in the lava, they might be able to help that along. I like that. Okay, real quick, can we talk about how it was the Avatar State episode, so season 2, episode 1, when they're trying to get him into the Avatar state, and they're like, let's try this. Let's try combining all the elements and throwing that at him and seeing if that works. And they end up just throwing hot mud at him because they're like, water, and they pour some water, earth, and they throw some dirt, fire, and they just like he takes a torch off the wall and puts it in the bowl, and then air, and he just goes with like a thing, and then they just throw it at him, and it's just hot mud. So I think it's hilarious that the 4 elements combined is just mud. Could airbenders bend farts? Listen, all I'm saying is that Milo, in the finale of Korra, when he and Ikki and Jinora are fighting a little bit, they're fighting some people, Milo farts in someone's face, like his butt is like right there. And it's so funny, but I was like, as I watched it, I literally said to my friends, I was like, did he use airbending to make the fart stronger? Like, it's possible. Oh yeah, D'Angelo, it's your birthday! All right, on the count of 3, let's all sing happy birthday to D'Angelo. Because I promised I would. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear D'Angelo. Happy birthday to you. Bone bending. Someone mentioned bone bending last week or 2 weeks ago. What does that mean? Bone bending. But also we have to think about what bones are and what people are bending when they're bending things. Like there's marrow. What is bone marrow? Any scientists, any biologists or doctors know what's up with bone marrow? Fibrous, collagen, and crystallized calcium. So, but what elements are earthbenders bending? And by elements, I don't mean blood, earth, fire. I mean literally periodic table of elements. What periodic table of elements are earthbenders bending? I wonder if there's a way, I bet Top could figure it out, to pick and choose which elements you're bending. So if you're thinking about bending calcium, maybe you could bone bend. That would take really specialized training and study. Bending glass. Yeah, sandbenders can definitely bend glass because isn't that what glass is? It's just like sand, right? So I guess normal earthbenders can as well, but maybe they won't be as good at it. But I bet sandbenders are great at bending glass. What houses do I think the gang members would belong to? All right, Aang, Hufflepuff, Katara, either Gryffindor, Gryffindor, Sokka, Ravenclaw, Zuko. I always think that Zuko's a Ravenclaw, and who was I arguing? Maybe I was arguing with my friend Micah about this. Someone was saying that Zuko's a Slytherin, and I was like, you can't put all the Fire Nation in Slytherin. That's not how it works. Azula is a Slytherin, but Zuko is not. Oh no, I think Zuko's a Gryffindor. I think he's a Gryffindor. He has a little bit of Ravenclaw in him, but I think he's a Gryffindor. Who else is in the gang? Toph, I think is a Slytherin. Suki. I think Suki, I don't know. I'll put her in Gryffindor, but I don't know. And then Momo is a Slytherin. And Appa's a Hufflepuff. That's my answer. Feel free to disagree. Those are my answers. What if Ba Sing Se was real? How do you feel? Ba Sing Se has issues. Listen. What element would Hermione bend? She feels kind of Earth to me. Just in that she's very, she has opinions. And she's strong about them. Draco. I'm seeing Draco bending lightning. But I feel like that's just me being like, Slytherin, fire. Let me think about this more critically. I'm trying not to equate him with Zuko. He could be air. I could see him, he's not carefree like an airbender, but he's flighty. I'm not saying that airbenders are flighty, but air or fire? That's my answer. So I think Ron would be I also think he would be a firebender. I think the twins would be non-benders. Okay, fine. But if they were benders, airbenders, Harry, water. The entire Weasley family. I can't go through everyone right now. Dumbledore sucks. There is no live action movie. Why would you insinuate that there is a live action movie? Alright folks, my voice is tired. Signing off. Take care of yourselves. My mom just texted me. Which chapter was today? Chapter 5!